We're in the Tosefta. This is Sanhedrin Yod Dalet, so Parak Yod Dalet, chapter 14. This is the last chapter in Sanhedrin for the Tosefta. It says, an apostate city never was and is not ever going to be. And why was the matter written? To say, expound it and receive a reward. They do not declare 3 towns to be apostate towns in the land of Israel, so as not to wipe out settlement in the land of Israel. But they declare 1 or 2 to be apostate cities. Rabbi Shimon says, even 2 they may not declare, but they may declare 1 town in Judah and 1 town in Galilee to be apostate towns. And near the frontier, they may not declare even 1 town to be an apostate town, so that Gentiles will not break through and wipe out settlements in the land of Israel. When the heavier mode of execution, stone, not slain, hits the men of the apostate city, a lighter punishment affects their property in the town. When is it lighter for the men of the apostate city? It is heavier for their property and for the town. And when they are put to death through stoning, their property and the town itself are permitted. And when they are put to death by sword, their property and the town are prohibited. And this is actually, we went over this in the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam's Mishnah Torah in, I think it's in AvaTorahJudaism, the laws of AvaTorahJudaism, idol worship, foreign worship. So it says, ass drivers, camel drivers, and people passing from place to place, who spent the night in its midst and became apostate with the others of the town, are put to death by the sword. Their property in the town are prohibited. And if they spent 30 days in the town, they are put to death by the sword, and their property in the town are prohibited. But if they did not spend 30 days in the town, well, they are put to death by the sword, their property in the town are permitted. But under all circumstances, those who have incited the town to apostatize are put to death by stoning, and their property in the town are prohibited. If women and children entice the townsfolk to apostatize, they are put to death by the sword, but their property in the town are permitted. If women entice the population to apostatize and not men, children and not adults, is it possible that the town should be declared an apostate city? The scripture says the inhabitants of their town, Deuteronomy 13, verse 14, the matter is determined by the deeds of the residents of the town, and the matter is not determined by the deeds of all such sorts as these. The minor children of residents of an apostate city who apostatize with it are not put to death. Rabbi Eliezer says they are put to death. So he's the lone voice there. The first statement is referring to what the sages declare. So they're in the majority. And so said to him, Rabbi Akiva, and how shall I then interpret the verse? He will show you mercy and have compassion upon you and multiply you. Deuteronomy 13, verse 17. If the meaning is to have mercy on adults, lo, it already has been said, you will surely smite, Deuteronomy 13, verse 15. And if it is to have mercy on their animals, it has already been said, utterly destroy it, and all that is therein and its beasts, Deuteronomy 13, verse 15. How then shall I interpret, and he will show you mercy and have compassion upon you? This refers to the minors who are in the town. Rabbi Eliezer says, also the adults are put to death only upon the testimony of witnesses and after suitable warning of the consequence and mode of death resulting from their apostasy. Now, how shall I interpret it? He will show you mercy and have compassion upon you. Perhaps the judges may say, lo, if we declare the town to be an apostate town, tomorrow the brethren and relatives will bear hatred in their hearts against us. On that account, the Omnipresent has said, lo, I shall cause them to have mercy and to have love in their hearts for you, so as to say, we have nothing against you, for you judged honestly. And they do not mourn, but they grieve, for grief is expressed only in the heart. And the property of the righteous which is in the town is lost, but that which is outside is saved. And that of the wicked, whether in it or outside of it, is lost. Rabbi Eliezer says, proof of the matter is Lot. For he was in Sodom only on account of his property. Yet he went out with his empty hands on his head, as it is said, hurry, escape. Genesis 19, verse 22. It is enough for you if you escape with your life. Rabbi Shimon said, on what account did they rule the property of the righteous which is in it is lost? Because that property caused the righteous to live among evil people. And is it not a matter of an argument a fortiori? And if property, which does not see, hear, or speak, because it caused righteous men to live among wicked people, Scripture has ruled that it must be burned. He who turns his fellow from the way of life to the way of death, all the more so that he should be put to death by burning. Offerings intended for use on the altar are left to die. Things which are consecrated for the upkeep of the house are to be redeemed. Rabbi Shimon says its cattle, including firstlings and tithe of cattle, and its spoil, excluding money which has been consecrated and money which has taken on the status of second tithe, as to that which is attached to the ground, one way or the other, it is permitted. As it is said, you shall gather, excluding that which is attached to the ground. In another city, Jericho, everything one way or the other, attached to the ground or not, is prohibited. He who kills a man burns clothing, hamstrings the cattle. Rabbi Meir says that which is usually poured out is poured out, and that which is usually burned is burned, and that which is usually hamstrung is hamstrung. They do not put a man to death by arrows or spears, or by the head of a sword, but only by the edge of the sword. As it is said, with the edge of the sword, Deuteronomy 13, verse 15. And it shall be a ruin forever, and it shall no more be built again, Deuteronomy 13, verse 16. It should not be made even into vegetable patches or orchards, the words of Rabbi Yoshi HaGalili. And Rabbi Akiva says, it shall not be built again, as it was, it may not be built, but it may be made into vegetable patches and orchards. And it will be a ruin forever, as it was in the days of Yehoshua. Rabbi Yoshi and Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha say, lo, Scripture says, cursed is the man before the Lord who will rise and build its city, Jericho, Joshua 6:26. Now don't we know that it is called Jericho? But the meaning is that one should not rebuild it and call it by the name of some other town, and that one should not build some other town and call it Jericho. With the loss of his firstborn shall he lay the foundation thereof, and with the loss of his youngest son shall he set up the gates thereof. 1 Kings 16:34. And so it says, in his days did Hiel the Bethlehemite build Jericho, Joshua 6:26. And did not Hiel belong to Jehoshaphat, and Jericho to the district of Benjamin? And why was the matter blamed on Ahav? It teaches that they hang guilt on one who already is guilty. Similarly, in Jonathan the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, Judges 18:30. Now was he the son of Manasseh? And was he not the son of Moses? And was the matter blamed on Manasseh? It teaches that they hang guilt on one who already is guilty. They're referring to a textual variant of, not a textual variant, but an artifact in the text where typically when you write letters above the line, it's kind of like a correction, and it says almost like it says Moshe, but there's a noon that's put above the line there in the text, and it spells Menashe. So what they're trying to say is that it was Jonathan the son of Gershom, the son of Moses, but the text says Menashe because they're pinning it on the king who was guilty for corruption and degradation of society. It teaches that they hang the guilt on one who was already guilty. And with the loss of Abiram, his firstborn, he laid the foundation thereof. And with the loss of Segub, his youngest son, he set up the gates thereof. 1 Kings 16, verse 34. In the instance of Abiram, he had no example from which to learn. But in the case of Segub, that wicked man had an example from which to learn. They wanted to increase their money. Why? Because a curse had affected them, and their funds simply continued to decline. And so Scripture says, according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke by the hand of Joshua the son of Nun, 1 Kings 16:34. Rabbi Shimon ben Eleazar says that one, Jericho, he did not build, but he built another one. And when it was built, people were permitted to live in it. For it said, and the sons of the prophets which were in Jericho drew near to Elisha, 2 Kings 2:5. Now a court might say, lo, if we declare a town to be an apostate town, we shall destroy the land of Israel. But just as it is a delight before the omnipresent to see the strengthening of the righteous, so it is a joy before the omnipresent to see the downfall of the wicked. As it is said, when the wicked perish, there is rejoicing, Proverbs 10, verse 11. An apostate city, its inhabitants, remnants, produce, a pedestal for an idol, and what is on it, a Merciless, so I think that's the god Mercury, and what is on it, and anything to which the prohibition against idolatry applies, all of them are forbidden as any sort of benefit. The defiant elder who taught and actually carried out his teaching is liable. One who taught but did not carry out his teaching is exempt. If he taught with the stipulation of actually carrying out his teaching, even though he did not actually carry out his teaching, he is liable. He who prophesies to uproot something which is taught in the Torah is liable. Rabbi Shimon says if he prophesied to nullify part to keep part, he is exempt. But if he prophesied in the name of idolatry, even if he confirms it today and nullifies it tomorrow, he is liable. So Rabbi Shimon is the lone voice there. And it says, he who prophesies concerning something which he did not hear, like Zedekiah ben Hananiah, I think that's Hananiah. It's in English, so 1 Kings 22:11. And he who prophesies what was not said to him, like Hananiah ben Azor, who heard things from Jeremiah the prophet, which he was prophesying in the upper marketplace, and went and prophesied them in the lower marketplace. He who suppresses his prophecy, like Yonah ben Amittai, and he who deems the prophecy to be exaggerated, like the friend of Micha, and a prophet who transgressed his own teaching, like Iddo, and he who changes his prophecy, a non-priest, a person who has immersed on that day and awaits sunset to complete his purification, and one whose atonement rite is not yet complete, and one whose clothing for service in the cult is lacking in some aspect, and one whose hands and feet are not yet washed, and one whose head is disheveled, or who is drunk, who served in the cult. All of them are subject to death penalty. And how are they put to death? Through the action of heaven. All perjurers and illicit lovers go and suffer the form of death which they had brought on their victim. If by stoning they are stoned, if it was by burning they are burned. Under what circumstances? When they are in the same status as the victim to be subject to that same mode of execution. If the death penalty attached to the crime is stoning, the accused is stoned and the witnesses are stoned. If it was to be burned, the victim is burned and they are burned. But here he is subject to the death penalty through burning, while the perjurers are executed through strangulation. And this is the end of Sanhedrin.